Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring something truly unique,
Oh, yeah.
an excerpt from Lettera al Universo, which translates to Letter to the Universe from Italian.
Oh,
And the author is attempting something pretty ambitious.
okay.
He wants to build a framework that connects general relativity and quantum field theory.
Wow.
Oh,
And how does he to go about that?
that's what's really fascinating.
Yeah.
He's using insights from film and philosophy.
Oh, wow. That's not your typical approach to theoretical physics.
It's certainly a blend of science, art, and personal experience, and philosophical thought.
Wow.
So we're in for a wild ride.
Okay.
So he starts by claiming that cinema, and I'm using that term broadly here, is the missing link to understanding reality and the universe.
Okay.
He's not talking about Hollywood blockbusters here.
Right.
He's defining cinema as the very movement of reality and nature, both around us and within us.
Okay.
So it's kind of a macro and micro view of cinema.
Yeah, interesting.
So then he dives into the work of philosopher Gilles Deleuze,
Okay.
specifically the concept of image movement and image time.
Okay.
And to put it simply, image movement is like a traditional film.
Boy.
You're watching a closed system of action and reaction unfold on a screen.
Right.
But image time represents the real world, an open system where our actions have consequences that can actually change the way we think.
So it's not just passive observation, it's active participation in transformation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Deleuze also talks about the crystal image as the highest form of image time. But to be honest, that concept is a little dense, even for me.
Yeah, we can maybe circle back to that.
You can circle back if it becomes relevant.
Yeah.
So the author argues that we need living cinema, or cinema vivente, to bridge the gap to a holistic quantum universe.
I like that.
Yeah. And he uses this example of the protagonist from Taxi Driver becoming self-aware, realizing he's in a film,
Okay.
and choosing his own path, stepping out of the screen and into our four-dimensional world.
Right. It's like breaking the fourth wall, right?
Exactly.
And this ties into a key idea, accessing information from hidden realities.
Okay.
He suggests that we can actually get information from these other realities by attracting quantum information that exists at the event horizon of a black hole.
Okay. Hold on. Attracting quantum information sounds pretty out there.
Yeah.
How do we even know that's possible?
Well, he connects this to the observer effect in quantum physics, the idea that observation itself can impact reality.
Right.
He envisions these superpositions of possibilities existing at the event horizon,
Okay.
which basically represent all the things that could have happened but haven't in our reality.
But it's sort of like a cosmic storehouse of what-ifs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he links this back to our own thoughts and imagination,
Okay.
suggesting that even the most absurd ideas exist in this superimposed state simply because we've imagined them. He ties this to the quantum field theory of Fagan and D'Ariano, where consciousness is seen as the unity of field, and our thoughts and imagination contribute information to these hidden realities through something called the collapse of the wave function.
Okay, I'm trying to keep up here.
Sure.
So if our thoughts can influence reality, does that mean we can tap into information from these alternate dimensions?
That's what he's suggesting. And to illustrate this, he points to a scene in Interstellar where Murph thinks she has a ghost in her room pushing books off the shelf.
Okay.
But it turns out to be her father, Cooper, communicating from another dimension through gravity.
So he's using these film examples to make these points about hidden realities and the power of consciousness more relatable.
Yeah.
But how does all of this tie back to his main goal of uniting relativity and quantum physics?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He suggests that Newton's third law of motion, the one about every action having an equal and opposite reaction, applies not just in our reality, but across the multiverse.
Okay.
He argues that every action we take, whether motivated by love and collaboration or fear and hate, has consequences that ripple outwards, affecting these interconnected dimensions.
So even small acts of kindness or cruelty could have a much larger impact than we realize.
Exactly. It's like a cosmic butterfly effect, only amplified across multiple realities.
Oh.
He even suggests that we all have infinite alternate selves, which Cooper in Interstellar calls Loro, representing all the paths we didn't take.
Okay.
And we're all connected to these other selves through quantum entanglement.
Okay. Now my head is officially spinning.
Yeah.
If we're all entangled across the multiverse,
Wow.
how can we even begin to comprehend or measure something as intangible as consciousness?
That's a huge question. And the author suggests we can do it through imagination action and even the language of mathematics.
So our thoughts, actions, and the way we communicate all contribute to the measurement of consciousness.
That's what he's proposing.
Yeah.
Think about Murph in Interstellar.
Ah.
She uses binary code and Morse code to communicate with Cooper, who is essentially her higher self in another dimension.
Okay.
It's like she's using these abstract systems of symbols to access a higher level of information.
Right.
And this leads him to introduce the concept of qualia from Fagin's theory.
Okay.
Qualia are essentially the subjective personal experiences we have that can't be replicated or fully described to others.
Okay.
Like how you feel when you listen to your favorite song or the specific way chocolate tastes to you.
So it's the unique flavor of your own individual experience.
Exactly. The author argues that because qualia are so personal, they make consciousness incredibly difficult to measure externally.
Okay.
He compares this to the observer effect in physics, where simply observing a phenomenon can change it.
Right.
So
So if qualia are unique to each individual,
yeah,
does that mean we're all fundamentally isolated from each other?
that's where things get a little more complex. He suggests that even though qualia are personal shared experiences, can create overlapping qualia.
Oh.
For example, imagine a speaker at a conference sharing their personal story with the audience.
Okay.
Even though everyone has their own individual qualia, the shared experience of listening to the speaker creates a kind of temporary overlap.
So it's like those shared experiences, whether it's through art, music, conversation, or even just being in the same room with other people, can create a kind of temporary collective consciousness.
Precisely. And the author believes that these shared experiences can have a powerful influence on our individual qualia, either positively or negatively.
Okay.
It's like we're all contributing to the flavor of the overall experience.
This is getting pretty deep.
Yeah.
So if shared experiences can influence our qualia,
Yeah.
does that mean we're all partly responsible for the state of the world, not just individually,
Right.
but collectively?
That's a really interesting question, and I think the author would agree that we do have a collective responsibility.
Okay.
He uses Dante's Divine Comedy to illustrate this point.
Okay. How does Dante's epic poem about heaven, hell, and purgatory fit into all of this?
Remember, the author's premise is that anything we can imagine exists in a parallel universe.
Okay.
So he's suggesting that Dante's Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise actually exist as real realms in alternate dimensions.
Hold on. He's suggesting that a fictional work of literature created centuries ago represents actual realities.
Yes, and he goes on to argue that these realms have overlapping qualia with our own reality because of how we interpret and experience Dante's work.
So by reading Divine Comedy, or even just thinking about the concepts of heaven, hell, and purgatory, we're actually tapping into those qualia and potentially influencing our own reality.
That's exactly what he's proposing. He gives a couple of examples.
Not
A
bad.
criminal who reads about the punishment of users in Inferno and decides to reform his ways.
Okay.
Or someone struggling with addiction, finding redemption after reading Purgatorio.
Those are powerful examples. It sounds like he's saying that the meaning we derive from external sources, like literature, art, or even film,
Yeah.
can be internalized and expressed through action, leading to real-world change. I think he calls this informa azione viva, living information action.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he takes this concept even further by connecting it to the development of a sixth sense.
Okay.
He suggests that we've actually been unconsciously acting on information from these alternate realities all along, but we're limited by our five senses and our fear of death.
So by developing this sixth sense, which he defines as a kind of active consciousness,
Yes.
we could consciously tap into these other realities
Right.
and use that information to create positive change.
That's the idea. He even proposes the need for new teaching methods and laboratories to practice what he calls movimento vivo, living movement,
Okay.
which is essentially simulating new realities and practicing extrasensory communication.
This is all pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is.
But if this living cinema and sixth sense are real, why haven't we fully developed them yet? Are we just not evolved enough?
He argues that it's because we've been so focused on material reality and the limitations of classical physics
Okay.
that we haven't learned to perceive or interact with these alternate realities effectively.
Okay.
But he's optimistic that we can change that.
It all sounds very sci-fi, but also incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
What about all the science fiction books and movies that have been exploring these themes for decades?
Uh-huh.
Are they just works of fantasy, or could they be playing a role in this evolution of consciousness?
The author suggests that science fiction often anticipates real-world discoveries and technologies
Okay.
because the qualia of the creators are somehow leaking into our reality through the event horizon.
So it's like these seemingly fictional stories might actually be reflections of real realities in parallel worlds,
Yeah.
and their qualia are influencing scientists and inventors in our world.
Exactly.
That's a wild thought.
It is, and he takes it even further
Okay.
by suggesting that we're all living in a limited holographic reality right now because of our restricted perception.
So we're trapped in a kind of illusion.
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But he believes that by activating our sixth sense,
Boy.
this active consciousness,
Uh-huh.
we can break free from those limits and access the infinite potential of the quantum universe.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But how do we even begin to reconcile the concept of infinity with our finite existence?
He contrasts two different ways of thinking about infinity.
Okay.
In a closed system, like the one we currently perceive infinity, is actually limited by our inability to exercise our sixth sense.
Okay.
We're stuck in what he calls the eternal return of the same,
Okay.
like being trapped in a repeating loop.
So it's like running on a cosmic treadmill going through the same motions over and over.
Exactly.
Okay.
But in a truly open system governed by quantum physics, infinity allows for constant interaction with countless realities.
Okay.
He describes this as the eternal return of the same without cyclicity,
Okay.
where we're constantly evolving and experiencing new possibilities.
So it's still an eternal return, but instead of being stuck in a loop, we're constantly growing and exploring.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
He believes that in this state, we're truly in harmony with the one, with everything.
Okay.
And he ends his letter with a passionate call to action.
Okay.
He feels compelled to share these ideas and collaborate with others who can perceive these qualia
Mm-hmm.
and help create what he calls laboratories of new realities.
So he's inviting us to join him in creating spaces where we can explore these ideas and develop our sixth sense and ultimately create a better world.
That's his vision.
Yeah.
He believes we can evolve into conscious creators, exploring the infinite potential of the universe and using that potential to create a more harmonious and fulfilling reality for everyone.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. We've covered everything from cinema and consciousness to quantum physics and the multiverse.
It is, I'm especially intrigued by the idea that our thoughts and imagination could be more than just mental constructs,
Yeah.
that they could actually be windows into other realities that are influencing our world in ways we're only beginning to understand.
It's a powerful concept.
What about you? What stands out to you from this first part of the letter?
Honestly, I'm still grappling with the implications of living cinema. It's a powerful metaphor, and if what the author is suggesting is true, then we have a much greater responsibility for the reality we're creating, not just individually, but collectively.
That's a great point, and it leads to a whole bunch of new questions.
Yeah.
For example, if we're all filmmakers in this living cinema, what kind of movie are we making right now?
Right.
And what kind of movie do we want to make?
Those are questions worth pondering, and I think we'll need to dive a little deeper into the author's ideas to even begin to answer them.
Absolutely. We've only scratched the surface of this letter to the universe, and there's so much more to explore.
I agree. Let's continue this deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
Picking up where we left off, the author's concept of living cinema. You know, it really challenges us to think differently about our role in shaping reality.
Yeah, it definitely makes you question those times you've thought, if only I'd made a different choice.
Right. Like instead of dwelling on the past, what if we focused on, becoming more conscious filmmakers in the present?
Right.
One of the things the author emphasizes is the power of our actions
Right.
and how they can ripple out across these interconnected dimensions.
He uses Newton's third law as an analogy, saying that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
But how does that apply to the multiverse?
He suggests that positive actions, especially those rooted in love and collaboration, generate positive effects that extend beyond our immediate reality.
So it's not just about being nice, it's about
Right.
the motivation behind our actions.
Exactly. The author seems to believe that genuine compassion and a desire to connect with others create a different kind of energy than actions driven by ego or self-interest.
That makes me think about the ripple effect. You know how even small acts of kindness can have a cascading impact?
Yeah.
Is he suggesting that this impact might be even greater than we realize because it's echoing through the multiverse?
That's a fascinating interpretation, and I think it aligns with his idea of interconnectedness. On the flip side, he argues that actions fueled by negativity, like fear, hate, or selfishness, also generate consequences that ripple outward.
So it's not just about avoiding bad deeds, it's about cultivating a more positive and compassionate mindset overall.
Yeah.
Because even seemingly insignificant choices could have unforeseen consequences in other realities.
That's a pretty profound implication.
Mhm.
It raises the stakes, doesn't it?
It does, and it brings us back to the central question of how we measure something as intangible as consciousness. The author mentions imagination, action, and mathematics as potential tools. How do those fit together?
He uses the example of Murph communicating with Cooper in Interstellar. She uses binary code and Morse code, essentially abstract systems of symbols, to receive information from another dimension.
Right.
It's like she's tapping into a higher level of understanding through this symbolic language.
So it's not just about what we think,
Right.
but how we structure and communicate those thoughts.
Precisely. And that makes me think about the power of art, music, and storytelling, how they can evoke profound emotions and insights that go beyond words.
Right.
The author even suggests that science fiction, through its use of language and imagery, might be a form of premonition influencing real-world discoveries.
So a story like 2001, A Space Odyssey, wasn't just entertainment.
Right.
It was potentially planting seeds for the development of AI.
That's a very intriguing idea. He's proposing that the qualia, the subjective experiences of the creators, might be somehow influencing the collective consciousness and shaping the course of human innovation.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the stories we're telling ourselves both individually and as a society, and how are they shaping our reality?
That's a big question.
Mm.
But it also highlights the potential we have to consciously create a more positive and inspiring narrative.
Definitely. Okay, I want to circle back to this idea of living cinema. What does it actually look like to practice this concept in our daily lives? It's not like we can all just walk into a movie and become the characters, right?
Right. It's more about becoming aware of the movie that's already playing in our minds.
Right.
And making conscious choices about the kind of story we want to tell.
So it's about recognizing that our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all contributing to the script,
Yes.
and that we have the power to rewrite it.
Exactly. The author believes that by developing our sixth sense, our active consciousness, we can become more intentional and skillful directors of our own lives.
That sounds empowering, but also a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
He doesn't offer a step-by-step guide,
Yeah.
but he does stress the importance of creating laboratories of new realities where we can experiment with new ways of being and develop our extrasensory communication skills.
So it's not something we can learn from a book. We have to actively practice and experience it for ourselves.
That seems to be the key.
Yeah.
He talks about the need for movimento vivo, living movement, which I interpret as engaging with reality in a more dynamic and embodied way.
What would that look like in practice?
I think it's about being more present in our bodies, more attuned to our senses, and more open to new experiences that challenge our, ways of thinking and perceiving.
Okay.
It's like learning a new language.
Right.
It requires effort, dedication, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones.
That makes sense. It's not about passively absorbing information, but actively experimenting and pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible.
Exactly. And I think that's where the idea of laboratories of new realities comes in.
Yeah.
These could be physical spaces, communities, or even just internal states of mind where we can explore these ideas and practices in a supportive environment.
It sounds like a fascinating blend of personal exploration and collective collaboration.
It is. And I think it speaks to the author's overall vision of a future where we're all co-creating a more harmonious and fulfilling reality.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment, it's about
Right.
contributing to a greater good.
Precisely. The author seems to believe that by developing our individual living cinema skills, we can also contribute to a more positive and expansive collective narrative.
Okay, so we're all actors in this grand cosmic play,
Right.
but we also have the potential to become directors, choreographers, and even screenwriters.
Yeah,
That's a pretty amazing thought.
it is. And it leads to so many new questions.
Yeah.
For example, what are the ethical considerations of this living cinema?
Right.
If our thoughts and actions are impacting other realities, how do we ensure that we're not creating unintended consequences?
That's a great point. It seems like the author is implying that the most important thing is to act from a place of love and compassion,
Right.
because those intentions will create positive ripples throughout the multiverse. But what if we mess up? What if our movie doesn't turn out the way we planned?
That's where the idea of laboratories of new realities becomes even more important.
Right.
We need safe spaces to practice, to experiment, and to learn from our mistakes.
It's like any creative process, there will be challenges, setbacks, and revisions along the way.
Exactly. But if we embrace the process with curiosity, courage, and a willingness to collaborate, I think the possibilities are truly limitless.
I love that idea. It's not about striving for perfection, but about embracing the journey of discovery and creation.
Right. And I think that's a core message of the author's letter to the universe, that we're all on this incredible journey of evolution, both individually and collectively. And by tapping into the power of living cinema, we can become conscious co-creators of a more beautiful and fulfilling reality.
This is all so much to take in. What are some of the other key takeaways you're getting from the letter so far?
Well, I'm still wrestling with the concept of qualia.
Yeah.
They're so subjective and difficult to grasp.
Me too. It's like trying to describe the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had it before.
Exactly.
Ah.
But the author makes an interesting point about shared experiences creating overlapping qualia, like the example of a speaker at a conference. Even though everyone in the audience has their own unique experiences and perspectives, the shared act of listening to the speaker creates kind of temporary merging of qualia.
So even though we're all experiencing reality through our own individual lenses, we can still find moments of connection and shared understanding.
That's what he seems to be suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder if we can create those moments of overlapping qualia through shared experiences like listening to music, attending a play, or even just having a meaningful conversation. What other possibilities might there be for expanding and deepening our connection with others?
That's such a good question. It makes me think about all the different ways we can tune in to the qualia of others and create more harmony and understanding in our relationships.
Right. And if the author is correct about the interconnectedness of all things, then those seemingly small acts of connection could have ripple effects far beyond what we can imagine.
It's like we're all part of this intricate web.
Yeah.
And even the slightest vibration can be felt throughout the entire structure.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the author's concept of the holographic nature of reality.
Right.
If we're all interconnected in this way, then perhaps our individual experiences are just different facets of a much larger and more complex reality.
It's like we're all looking at the same diamond, but from different angles, seeing different reflections of its brilliance.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it makes me wonder, what would it be like if we could somehow combine all of our individual perspectives into a single unified vision?
Yeah.
What kind of reality could we create then?
That's a question that I don't even know how to begin to answer. But I think that's the beauty of the author's letter to the universe. It's full of these mind-bending questions that challenge us to think beyond the limitations of our current understanding.
Absolutely. He's not offering us a set of answers, but rather a framework for exploring the infinite possibilities of consciousness and reality.
And it seems like the key to unlocking those possibilities is to cultivate our sixth sense, our active consciousness, and use it to become more intentional and skillful co-creators of the world we want to live in.
Right. And I think the journey begins with becoming more aware of the movie that's already playing in our minds, the stories we tell ourselves, the beliefs we hold, and the choices we make each day.
So the first step is to become more mindful, more conscious of the reality we're already creating.
Exactly. And from there, we can start to explore new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that align with the kind of world we want to see.
It's like we're being invited to step into the role of director, screenwriter, and lead actor in our own lives and to collaborate with others in creating a collective masterpiece.
That's a powerful image. And I think it speaks to the incredible potential that lies within each of us to become conscious co-creators of a more beautiful, more harmonious, and more fulfilling reality.
I'm really curious to hear more about how the author suggests we go about developing this sixth sense and creating these laboratories of new realities.
Me too. Let's delve into the last section of his letter and see what insights we can glean.
This letter is incredibly thought-provoking.
Oh, absolutely. I think this whole concept of living cinema, it's both exciting and a little daunting, you know? It's like he's thrown open the door to a whole new way of seeing reality in ourselves.
Yeah, he's asking us to rethink some pretty fundamental assumptions, like the idea that we're just passive observers of the world around us.
Right.
He's proposing that we're active participants and that our thoughts, feelings, and actions have a much greater impact than we realize.
And not just in our own lives, but potentially, across multiple dimensions. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, but it's also incredibly liberating in a way.
Right.
If we're truly co-creators of reality, then we have the power to change things.
Yeah.
We're not just stuck with the script we've been given.
Right. It's like he's handing us the camera and saying, okay, now it's your turn to make a movie.
Right.
But with that creative freedom comes a huge responsibility.
Yes.
How do we ensure that we're creating a film that's positive, harmonious, and beneficial for everyone?
That's a big question, and I think it's one that he only begins to address in this letter. He emphasizes the importance of love collaboration and the development of our sixth sense, but those are still pretty broad concepts.
I agree. I'm left wanting more concrete guidance.
Yeah.
Like, what are some practical steps we can take
Right.
to cultivate this living cinema in our daily lives?
He talks about the need for laboratories of new realities, but what do those actually look like? Are they physical spaces, communities, or internal states of mind? And how do we access them?
He doesn't really elaborate on that, which is a bit frustrating.
Right.
But, I think it's important to remember that he's presenting these ideas as a starting point
Right.
for exploration and experimentation.
Right.
He's not claiming to have all the answers.
That's true. He's more of a visionary than a practical guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think his insights can be incredibly valuable, even if we're still figuring out the how-to part.
Absolutely. So let's try to distill some of the key takeaways from this letter and see if we can find some practical applications.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so first he establishes the concept of living cinema, this idea that we're not just watching the movie of reality, but actively creating it through our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Yes.
He suggests that we need to develop our sixth sense or active consciousness to become more skillful directors of our own lives and to access the infinite potential of the quantum universe.
And he uses film examples like Taxi Driver and Interstellar to illustrate these ideas.
Yeah.
The protagonist of Taxi Driver, breaking the fourth wall and choosing his own path,
Right.
is a powerful metaphor for taking control of our own narratives.
Right.
And the idea of communicating across dimensions in Interstellar speaks to the potential of consciousness to transcend the limitations of space and time.
Right. And he ties this back to his grand ambition of unifying general relativity and quantum field theory. He proposes that Newton's third law, the one about action and reaction, applies not just in our physical reality, but across the multiverse.
Right.
So every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every decision we make sends ripples outward, affecting not just ourselves, but countless other realities.
I find that both inspiring and a little scary.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things and the responsibility we have to create positive change.
Definitely. He also introduces this concept of informa azione viva, or living information action, which suggests that the meaning we derive from external sources like books, movies, or even conversations can be internalized and then expressed through action, leading to real-world transformation.
It's like we're constantly absorbing information and energy from the world around us and then using that to shape our own reality. And if we're more conscious of the information we're taking in and the intentions behind our actions, we can become more powerful and effective creators.
That makes me think about the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences, whether that's through the people we spend time with, the books we read, the art we experience, or even the thoughts we allow to occupy our minds.
It's like curating the soundtrack of our own movie,
Yeah,
choosing music that uplifts, inspires, and motivates us.
exactly. Now, one of the most challenging concepts in the letter is this idea of qualia, those subjective personal experiences that make consciousness so difficult to measure. But he makes an interesting point about shared experiences creating overlapping qualia.
Right, like that example we talked about earlier of a speaker sharing their story with an audience.
Yeah.
Even though everyone have their own unique qualia, the shared experience of listening creates a temporary overlap.
It's like our individual bubbles of consciousness briefly merge,
Yeah.
creating a sense of connection and shared understanding.
And that makes me wonder if those moments of connection can have such a profound impact on our individual qualia. What might be possible if we could intentionally cultivate more of those experiences?
That's such a good question. It suggests that the quality of our relationships, the communities we build, and the way we interact with each other can have a ripple effect on our individual and collective consciousness.
And ultimately on the reality we create.
Exactly. Now, the author doesn't give us a clear roadmap for how to do all of this,
Right?
but he does emphasize the need for experimentation and collaboration. He
Yes.
calls for the creation of laboratories of new realities where we can explore these ideas and practices in a supportive environment.
I love that image.
Yeah.
It suggests a sense of playfulness, curiosity, and open-mindedness.
Yeah.
It's not about finding all the answers,
Right.
but about embracing the unknown and allowing ourselves to be surprised by what we discover.
Absolutely. And it's not something we have to do alone. In fact, the author seems to believe that collaboration is essential for creating lasting change. He's calling for a collective awakening, a shift in consciousness that allows us to tap into our full potential as co-creators of reality.
That's a beautiful vision. And I think it's one that resonates with a lot of people right now. There's a growing sense that we're on the cusp of something new, a shift in consciousness that could lead to a more just sustainable and fulfilling world.
I feel that too. It's like we're collectively waking up to the power of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And as we become more conscious, more intentional in our choices, we can create a reality that reflects our highest aspirations.
It's an exciting time to be alive, but it's also a time for deep reflection and responsibility.
Yeah.
If we're truly co-creating reality, then we need to be mindful of the stories we're telling, the choices we're making, and the impact we're having on ourselves, each other, and the world around us.
That's a powerful message to end on. What are your final thoughts on this letter to the universe?
Well, I'm walking away with a renewed sense of wonder and possibility. The author's ideas are challenging, thought-provoking, and ultimately inspiring. He's inviting us to step into a larger story, a grand cosmic narrative where we're not just passive observers but active participants. And I, for one, am ready to embrace that challenge.
Me too. It's like he's reminding us that we're all capable of creating magic.
Yeah.
We just need to remember how.
And to be brave enough to step onto the stage and play our part.
Beautifully said. To our listeners, we invite you to join us on this journey of exploration and discovery. Let's see what kind of movie we can create together.
The possibilities are endless.
That's all for our deep dive into this letter to the universe. We
Ocean.
hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep shining your light.